Hi everyone, welcome to Mamsu Code video guide session. In the previous video, we wrote our happy path test. Let's take a look for the recap. So here what we said was whenever I'm giving you all the valid data, the service has to persist the data, that is store the data and return it. Now the next set of tests that we will be writing is called validations test. So here what we are trying to do is whenever there is user input not meeting our requirement, then how should the system react? So that's what we are going to start writing. Before that, what we want to understand is whenever error occurs in our system, how do we want to keep track of it? So let me show you a diagram on what we are going to work on, and then we will come back to the coding. So here, what we have done so far is we went ahead and created our storage broker. And then we said the next layer is going to be our foundation layer, which is going to have the first level of business logic. So foundation services. Okay. Let's assume that, we do have another component which is required. Between the exposure and the foundation layer, we can have multiple other services. So for simplicity purpose to understand the concept that we're going to work on, let's just assume that the system involves a storage broker, next a foundation service, and then the exposure. So here what we're going to do is we have the user here who's interacting with the exposure. So this can either be a user or it can be a service which is trying to contact our service. Okay. Yeah. So here what we're trying to do is when exposure calls the foundation, it performs certain validations and then it calls the storage broker. And then we have our storage, which has the data. So this is our storage. Okay. So when this user interaction is happening, an error can happen at any layer. The error can happen here, 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 and everywhere else, right? So what we are trying to do is whenever there is an error happening in the whole system, we want to capture it and we want to preserve it so that in future, when we are investigating either because of a customer issue or looking for patterns, we do have the logs so that we can come back and refer to it. With that said, what is this logging? Let's assume that this is a logging component. Logging. So this is going to give us a capability of saving the transactions that we are asking it to save and then get it back when we need it. Okay. So just to understand where will this fit, right? So our system is going to provide a logging capability, but we are going to leverage an external library called iLogger that's going to provide us the actual logging. So if that is the case, I think you might have thought through it. So it will be provided under a broker section. The keywords like, we are talking to external people and all those things. So that will be here, right? So similar to storage broker, a broker is nothing but an entity that communicates our system transactions to outside our system boundaries. So similarly, logging broker will be communicating the logs to the external library that we will be interacting. So we want to wire this foundation service to the logging broker so that in the next test that we're going to write, that is all the validation failures. So whenever there's an error, what should it log? So we need this logging broker before proceeding to the validation test. That's what we're going to see in the code now. So right now I'm in the foundations user branch. Let me switch to the main branch and create a user branch itself. So users, Shri broker logging. And I want this to be based out of main branch because my foundations work is in progress, right? So I'll go create this. Okay, so now all my foundation folders have gone. Nice. So the first thing that we'll have to do is the pro folder. So loggings. Then as usual, we start with our interface. So here we are, interface. The syntax is I, that stands for interface, and we say logging broker.cs. Okay. So what is my interface going to hold? Let's define what the contract is going to be. So this is going to be void. That is, this method, whatever I'm using for logging, is not going to return anything. So what am I going to log? I'm going to log an error. So whenever there is an error going to be happening in our system, I'm going to call this method to log it. So what's the input parameter? Here, whenever there is an error, we call in the system as exception. So we want to handle that exception to be in the logs. So we say exception and the variable name is exception. Okay. Yeah, so this comes from the system class. Fine. So this is the contract that this logging broker is going to offer for our service to work with them. Now what we have to do is, this is my contract. We have to say how this log error is going to act. Let's get to the implementation. So right click, add class. And then here I say logging broker.cs. Okay. And I go and say I logging broker. It has to have the red line. So control and dot, it says implement the interface. Okay, nice. Since this is a single line, let me go ahead and remove the scope here. Okay, so now what we have to do here is whenever there is a log error happening, I need to do something. I need to log. So as I said previously, we're going to leverage our external library that's called iLogger. Okay, so we need to define the property that's going to hold the connection to the external library. So we can go with the shortcut prop, double tap, and this is going to be of type iLogger. That's our library, which we will add shortly. And then this is going to be my logger. Okay, so let's try to resolve. Yeah, so now it detected that install package Microsoft extensions logging abstraction. So this is the package that I want. I'll say find and install. Okay. Yeah. Now what we want to do is whenever there is an instance being created for this logging broker, the dependency of iLogger should be connected. So when we see the terms like instantiated, the dependency and all those things, so we'll have to think about how efficiently we can have that linkage established, so which can be achieved through constructor. So here, this is going to take a dependency of what? iLogger of type. So here, if you see the syntax, it says iLogger out T category name. So what is the type that it has to be giving out when this iLogger is being called? So this is going to be logging broker. So logger. So here what we're going to say is this dot logger equals logger. Okay. Whenever an logging broker object is instantiated, the dependency iLogging broker, the dependency iLogger, which has the type of logging broker, has to be assigned to this scope. Okay, since this is a single line, let's remove this. Okay, so far we have made the external library connection here, and we have made the link here telling that logging broker will have the wiring to the iLogger. So now let's go implement this. So what is this actual log error method going to do? So we say we're going to call the logger of log error. So if you take a look at this logger that's of type iLogger, it's providing us a lot of traces, right? So it says log, just log, then critical debug error information trace warning. So there are different, levels of logging, different types of logging that can be achieved. So depending on your application. So some example that I could think of is, let's say a user has been logged into the system, right? It's all just successful. There's no error. So we want to just trace the user telling that, okay, this is the time or this is the location where the user logged in, and this is what the user is doing next. So this kind of information. So that time using log error will not be appropriate. So you can either use log information or log trace depending on your storytelling. So log warning is like the system is not going to be stopped, but just we want to alert something that's happening in the system, right? So we can leverage these methods as appropriate. For now, our need is just for the log error. So I'm going here. And then if you see, there are 4 that can be called. So the first one, it says I'm going to take in the message and then the arguments. The next one, it says I'm going to take an event ID, a message, and arguments. So you can take a call on how you are going to define your logging standard in the system. For us, we just need, yeah. So this one is something that we are interested in. So it says it needs an exception. That's what we are capturing here. And the message. So what's the error message or the wording that is associated to the error here? Okay, let's see the last one. It says event ID, exception, message, and arguments, right? So this is something that we will be going for this example here, which is fine for our need. So I'm going to say exception, and then I'm going to pass the exception dot message. Yeah, so this is not a very strict rule here. So depending on your need, so whatever is your system or software capability you're offering, depending on that, you can use the log errors on the parameters. So this is all we need for logging. As a recap, what we have done is we understood what is this logging going to offer. So that's why we categorized that to be into broker. And then we went ahead with the code implementation of interface and then the implementation. So here we added up the extensions library. And then we said, this is the dependency. And I'm going to just give log error, which is what I'm going to log for, which is taking the exception and the message. OK. So before making a commit, you'll have to do certain things, right? So analyze, code cleanup, run code cleanup. OK, this is good. So you right click and build the solution. Once this is good, yeah, it automatically added up. Then we'll go run our test. So since we are working on master, it just has delete me test. It doesn't have the happy path test, which is fine. OK, everything looks good. So far, we have completed our logging broker, which will pave way for our next set of test cases. That is the validation test cases. So let's see in the next video how to write our validations test. Thank you for watching.